Well, welcome everybody to spending time with us tonight. Thanks for joining us for Tools for Trustees. We're going to try to provide some information for you, whether you serve on a church board or not, just to help you understand the services we provide as an interprovincial agency of the Moravian Church. I'm Chris Spaugh. I am the president and CEO of Moravian Ministries Foundation. I'm going to let my two co-hosts introduce themselves. Laura?
Hey, everybody, Laura Watson. I am our Vice President and Director of Services.
And I'm Vince Holbrook. I am the Director of Communication and Marketing.
So we are, again, thank you, those of you that have introduced yourself in the chat. And we are going to go through the presentation tonight. Please feel free to ask questions along the way. You can do that using the chat feature. We'll be monitoring that throughout the presentation. Please just ask your questions in chat, and we'll address those as appropriate as we go along. As mentioned, we are recording this. The recording will be sent out after the webinar, probably sometime tomorrow. You will also get a copy of the slides that we're going through tonight with additional links that are within the slides. Vince will send all that out to you afterwards. We'll also send a survey out. Please respond to the survey. Thank you for attending, but we also want your feedback on additional training opportunities and other things that you would like to see us deliver to the churches. So please take time to do the survey in response to the webinar. Vince, you've got the next slide.
Okay, so the Moravian Ministries Foundation offers 5 different areas of services for Moravian congregations and agencies. And so tonight we would like to just go over at a high level each of those 5 areas of services. And the first is investment management. The second is gift facilitation. The third will be stewardship services. And then we'll talk about gift planning. And then finally, we'll end the evening with grant funding for ministry. So first up, Chris is going to talk about investment management.
The centerpiece really of investment management for the foundation is our core product, the Moravian Common Fund. So why should you invest with Moravian Ministries Foundation? Simply put, why use us instead of 1-800-brokers or your favorite broker down the street, or maybe someone that manages your individual money? The first bullet point is very important. Your investment fees paid to the foundation stay within the church. Everything MMFA provides to the church is paid for by our investors. The fee paid to us goes back into the church versus going to some kind of commercial provider to put names on buildings or some other service. We're putting it back into ministry. MMFA receives no funds from the provinces, either the northern or southern province. We're not one of the agencies that gets provincial funding. So none of your common share or assessments go to our foundation in any way. We're solely funded by our investment fees. It allows us to do things like provide the Moravian Giving Portal, have the infrastructure in place that manages that, to pay the processing fees that go with those online transactions for our churches and agencies, also to provide stewardship, gift planning, gift facilitation. All of the things you're going to hear about tonight on our call are provided at the generosity of our investors. The second bullet point, institutional continuity. We're an interprovincial agency that's set up to be around in perpetuity forever. And with that, we have a historical record of interactions with the churches, why funds are structured the way they are. And we maintain that, where the institutional memory of a church board may be very short. As members roll off, they very quickly try to forget sometimes what happened during their tenure. We're that institutional memory for the church where we're involved. The last 2 bullet points are related in that there are power in numbers. Because you're joining together with other brothers and sisters from around the country to invest, we're able to manage money as a very large investor, and we can provide products that an individual cannot go buy, an individual church cannot go buy. Plus, if a church invests on their own, they have to open a ton of accounts, go through a lot of red tape and paperwork, and they're going to pay a lot more in fees than they do to our foundation. So there really is economies of scale and leverage combining together with other Moravians around the country to do investments. The next slide shows our investment pools. We have 7 different investment options now. This is new. For years, we just had 4. We have 2 ESG options now. We'll talk more about that in a moment. And our newest addition is the stable fund listed at the bottom of this chart. So the way this chart works, it's organized by the highest risk, highest return potential down to the lowest risk, lowest return potential. So really this slide, our growth allocation, about 78% of our investors invest in growth, primarily because we manage a lot of true endowment funds for our churches and agencies. So these are funds set up to exist forever and provide a return. So growth's the appropriate allocation. Our newest allocation to the stable fund is really more for cash management, something like a church's cash reserves or money that is temporarily set aside for a purpose that's going to be used within a year or two, something you don't want to subject to a lot of risk. And even in that portfolio, you could get a solid return right now, just managing in cash and cash products. And we'll cover that in more detail. We've had a couple of name changes to our investment pools. You'll see the name hybrid on there. Historically, we knew that as growth and income. Years ago, that would have been the 60-40 portfolio. It's certainly more complex than that now. And then our income portfolio used to be known as income and growth. We've changed the names to try to eliminate multi-use of the same word and just make it a little clearer what the goal of those portfolios are. The last option, the stable fund, again, this is our newest option. We've been asked for years if we had an option for cash management. We now do. The return on this portfolio as of the end of March, the yield was 4.87%. So that's pretty great for liquid cash. These are not a certificate of deposit that you're locking up for 6 months, a year, or 2 years. This is truly liquid money that we manage just for a solid return for the churches. Again, it's cash and cash equivalents. So what's made up in this portfolio? There's commercial paper in there. There's CDs in there. There's also treasuries and other products, but it's meant to be liquid, meaning if you invested in that portfolio and you needed money that week, we could do that within 2 days, get the funds to you. There are no penalties to withdraw money with any of our investments. So this is really a great option if you have cash that you need to keep in cash and just park it for a little while and get a higher return than you would in your checking or savings account. That's our stable fund. So on the next slide, this is a comparison of the core allocations or pools that we have at Moravian Ministries Foundation, and it shows the investment mix within each of those. So if you wanted to see, all right, the growth allocation has 35% equity versus the income allocation of 20% equity. So the growth allocation is a little more risky. You would expect to see that it's exposed to the market a little more. But again, all of these have the same really level of risk, but different return potentials and different time horizons. It's really dependent on what the use of the money is as you as a board consider investing. How you look at that depends really on the purpose, the time horizon, and the needs of the churches. All of our portfolios became more conservative entering this year. So all of them have less equity in them than they did at the first of the year, primarily just because of the outlook on the economy this year and also the performance that we experienced in the market last year. And bonds and fixed income products suddenly are great to have in your portfolio again because the returns are pretty good on those assets as well, versus just equities or some of the other products. Mission-aligned investing, ESG. This is still relatively new for us. We have 2 options with the ESG focus. So I wanted to spend a little time tonight explaining that. And one of the things we did earlier this year, late last year, was form a focus group to talk about what does this type of investing look like for Moravians. ESG is environmental, social governance. That's what those letters stand for in this context. And we wanted to see, what do Moravians say that is? And you guys know, probably within your own church, anytime you ask a group of Moravians something, you might get different answers. And we studied this to see where there's commonality, where there's similarities across the country, across churches, and interpretation of ESG. We ultimately landed on certain focus areas and certain prohibition areas. So for focuses, there was a lot of similarity around diversity, equity, and inclusion. So proactively investing in companies that are inclusive across all levels of their employees and stakeholders. That was important to Moravians. Environmental stewardship was another area that was important. Avoiding investments in those poor performers, those companies that do not care about the environment, or at least their actions lend us to think they don't care as much about our environment. Prohibitions came into play really around several areas, child labor being the first one, avoiding businesses that are engaged in harmful practices to children, gambling, avoiding businesses that reinforce addictive behaviors. Pornography was another one. We don't invest in any company that earns more than 1% of their revenue from pornography. You have to say more than 1%, because even large retailers like Walmart, Target, otherwise, they may sell something that could be labeled as pornography, but again, they're not getting more than 1% of their revenue from that source. Substance abuse was another prohibition, trying not to invest in any companies that generate a large percentage of their revenue from some kind of harmful substance. Rural poverty came into play in two factors, because really companies just want to raise living standards across the globe. Those are companies we want to invest in, as well as we want to ignore those companies that are not paying any attention to that. So at the end of the day, when we studied the responses, talked as a group, we landed on three areas of focus: improving lives, inclusive workplace, climate, natural resource solutions. Now on this slide, you start to see a lot of color, different color boxes. What do those boxes mean? Those represent the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Back in 2015, world leaders came together at the UN to discuss what are the factors we should look at to try to improve the world in general. And that's improving at the governmental level and the private sector, civil sector levels, how we all work together to raise the bar for all of humanity. And they settled on 17 focus areas. We picked 6 of those because they align to our 3 focus areas. So you'll notice under improving lives, those 2 boxes are a little hard to read on your screen, but under improving lives, you see zero hunger and quality education. So zero hunger, hunger is a solvable problem. It's not as solvable around the globe, certainly with more impoverished countries and economies, but it is, we have enough food in the world to feed people. That's a situation where we need to really look at food security. We need to look at improved nutrition, and we need to promote sustainable agriculture. So what we're trying to do in that area is invest in companies that do those things. Quality education listed there as well. Education's always been important to Moravians, ensuring exclusive and quality education across all sectors and promoting lifelong learning. Again, trying to invest in companies that have that in focus and really key in on those areas. Inclusive workplace, we have 2 areas there: gender equality, reduced inequalities are the 2 areas there. So gender equality is really empowering women and girls to be successful. So making sure there's equal representation in the leadership of an organization, equal representation on the board. That's gender equality. Reduced inequalities, that's inequality across countries. There are certain countries that are very discriminatory to certain people groups. We want to avoid those countries from an investment standpoint, and certainly avoid companies that would invest in a way that discriminates in any form or fashion. Climate is a little clearer. So if you look at climate, there's two areas there: affordable clean energy, ensuring access to affordable, reliable, sustainable energy for everybody across the globe, not just here in the US, but around the world. And the other area, climate action, investing in those companies that take the climate seriously and have made commitments to do that on an ongoing basis. So that's a little bit about investment management and the solutions here at Moravian Ministries Foundation. If you have questions, put those into the chat, or certainly reach out to me after the call today in the future days, and I'm happy to help. Vince is going to talk to us about gift facilitation. Vince?
Thank you, Chris. The second area of services that we provide is called gift facilitation. And within that category, I would like to talk about three different areas. The first is conversion of non-cash assets into cash. The second will be using the tools of philanthropy to make smarter gifts. And tools of philanthropy, that sounds like a 25-cent word, but actually this is just various kinds of funds that can be constructed with different goals in mind. Different kinds of funds can provide income. Other kinds of funds, like a donor advised fund, can allow the donor to make grants during their life, go ahead and make the gift, but then recommend grants going forward. And then the third area is providing online giving service at no charge to churches. That is our giving portal. We'll talk just a little bit about that. We cover all the card processing fees for the donors. And there's no cost or no deduction from that gift. It's received in full by the recipient. So imagine with me for a moment that it's December 29th and a wealthy member of your congregation decides that she needs to make a gift of stock before the end of the year. And the first thought is her congregation. But often it would be the case on December 29th that there would be nobody even in the church office to take a phone call. And even if there were, would that person know what to say and how to handle a gift like this? Now, before you accuse me of being contrived and choosing some very uncommon scenario to make this point, I will tell you that 12% of all gifts happen in the last 3 days of the year. And oftentimes after the Christmas Eve love feast, Moravians are tired and people are taking off to rest up and vacation and so forth, be with family. So I just want to say, you don't want to be that church that is unable to receive that gift, because somebody's going to receive that gift. So the Moravian Ministries Foundation, we do that. We'll be available to take a call like that at the end of the year. We handle these kinds of transactions all the time. So whether it's a gift of stock or real estate or life insurance, we can help that donor for you and make sure that the funds, that you're able to receive the value of that gift. Also, sometimes these gifts can be fairly complicated because there are multiple recipients. So somebody may be giving real estate, and the gift, the value of that gift is going to be divided among several. We can be that neutral party that can broker a complicated gift with multiple recipients like that. Another value that we can add in the area of gift facilitation is helping donors make smarter gifts sooner. Oftentimes, donors don't realize that using the different kinds of funds that we can establish for them, we can set up a gift so that the gift is decided and made now, but will provide them with a revenue stream for the duration of their life. So they don't need to wait. They can go ahead and make that gift sooner. Other kinds of gifts allow the joy of being able to see the impact of your gift during life. A donor advised fund, for example, is a kind of fund where the gift is made, but the donor can make grant recommendations for the remainder of their life and participate and experience the joy that gift is making. We can also help have conversation with donors to help them recognize the assets that they have that may be doing no good for them right now or will not be needed, and help them recognize those assets and put them to work to do good now. We can also foster discussions that help donors make gifts that are thoughtful and useful to the congregation with minimal restrictions. We hear that sometimes churches receive gifts that are highly restricted. The common thing we hear is, we've got enough money to take care of the graveyard for 2 more centuries, but, we need it for other things too. So we can intervene or help advise the donors to make sure that any restrictions they want to place are truly meaningful, and you end up with the least restricted gift that's possible. The giving portal, I hope that you all have had occasion to know about the giving portal. I think we're in our 3rd year of this service, and we have been able to provide this at no charge. There's no fees, no card processing fees deducted from the gift. So if a Moravian goes on to the portal and makes a gift to your church or agency, the full amount of that gift is received by you. And along with the gift, we send notes that let you know who made that gift, unless they have marked it as an anonymous gift. In most cases, you'll know who made that gift. So you can still keep up with people's progress toward their pledge and keep track of the amount of individuals within the church. Also, the giving portal allows people to establish recurring gifts. Some churches find this much better than a pledge card. A pledge card is an expression of intent, but a recurring gift is an action that sets it up for automatic payment. So the church knows about that recurring gift, and the donor doesn't have to take a chance on forgetting because they're traveling or whatever. We receive those gifts, we acknowledge the gifts, and we provide the tax receipts. So that's additional work that's taken off of the church because we take care of all that. We have promotional events around the giving portal. I hope you've heard of the Moravian Day of Giving. That is an event that we've had for 3 years in a row now, and it's grown each year. And ultimately, it is the churches and agencies who benefit from that, directly and indirectly. Directly, when the gift is to a church, and indirectly, if a gift is to a grant-making field of interest fund, those churches can apply for grants from those various funds. So we promote the Day of Giving as above and beyond the pledge type thing. We also promote special days like Giving Tuesday. We encourage people to honor and remember loved ones with gifts in memory of or honor of for days like Mother's Day and Father's Day and Memorial Day. And of course, it is the congregations that benefit from those gifts as well. And next, you are going to hear about the third area of service, which is Stewardship Services, from Laura.
Thanks, Vince. Good evening, everybody. Delighted to spend a few minutes to share a little bit about MMFA's Stewardship Services with you all. I want to start just by reading a passage of scripture, and this comes from the book of Ephesians, chapter 2, verse 10. And it says, "For we are what he has made us, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand to be our way of life." How does this verse speak to stewardship, and why is it important for MMFA's Stewardship Services? Well, this verse tells us that stewardship is about a lot more than money, and it's more than what we do through our church. Stewardship is a way of life. It's our identity. God created us in Christ Jesus for good works, created us to be stewards and to care for all that God has entrusted to us. So as God's stewards, we use our lives to reflect God's love and generosity in who we are and all that we do. So this is important to MMFA and our stewardship services. We are grounded in this kind of theology because we want to help you form and nurture faithful and generous stewards in your ministry setting. And we do this by partnering with you. There is no one program that fits everybody for the work of stewardship. We work with you to discern your community of faith's unique rhythms and culture. And then together we create a multi-year plan that encompasses all aspects of your church life and grounds them in healthy stewardship practices. You'll see there that our first goal is to shape leaders. Why is that goal number one? Well, we believe and know that having a pastor and leaders like yourselves who are willing to set the tone and fully embrace sometimes significant change is critical for a stewardship effort to be effective and sustainable. So we're going to work with you to help shape leaders. How do we do that? We, again, partner with you to identify ways to weave stewardship into the church's culture, to speak in a way that makes sense for the folks that are there as part of your community. We connect our pastors and lay leaders together to share best practices. We hear again and again from you all that it's valuable to know what Church X is doing, or Church Y tried this and it did work or it didn't work, and just to be able to share those things that you're up to in your stewardship ministries that others can learn from and benefit from. So we can connect you in that way. We also work really hard to take steps to help both you and the folks in your congregation have less fear and anxiety around money. We all have baggage related to money, right? Whether that's something that happened from when we were kids or has happened now as adults. And that can lead to a lot of negative emotion. So we work as part of our shaping leaders to help folks work through that so that you feel empowered and ready and have a healthy mindset about money to be able to talk about money with people. And then we, of course, share resources from other ecumenical partners, and so that you can learn from what other denominations even are up to. Our second goal is to educate believers, and we do that by facilitating workshops that help people have a holistic understanding of biblical stewardship. We'll talk more about that in a minute. Again, connecting you with educational resources that you can share in the congregation. Leading your congregation or community of faith through a structured process to help you identify the different resources and assets that God has entrusted to you that you can put to use for ministry. And then we help individuals and congregations and agencies envision and clarify their future ministries. It's easy to say we need to invite people to give time, talent, treasure, and work on stewardship, but you've got to be able to tell them why. What's that going to do? What's your vision and your mission? So that's an important part of educating folks. And then finally, we can help you assess the feasibility of various options through some of our development and stewardship services. And then our third goal there is to help you develop a holistic and sustainable stewardship ministry. It's not just a program that you opt in or out of on any given year. It's not a campaign, and it's a lot more than just an annual financial appeal to folks. Thriving stewardship ministries focus on gifts of time, talent, treasure, and testimony throughout the year, year after year. So we can help you with this and looking at your stewardship with fresh eyes. Again, by looking at the congregation's gifts, how are they being used and how are they making a difference in the world? We can work with you to create that year-round plan that incorporates those congregational gifts, that helps you enhance connections in your ministry and with one another. We include communication strategies in that process. And then we want to make sure whatever your church's mission or vision is for the future, that's part of the plan that you're implementing year after year. And then finally, part of that planning process is helping you learn best practices for investing, budgeting, and plan giving. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in detail. At the bottom of the slide here, you see 4 benchmark areas. Oftentimes we're asked, what does a healthy stewardship church look like? What should we be doing? What are the areas that matter most for us to have good stewardship ministries? And so we are sharing these 4 components, which are theology, mission and vision, leadership, and again, having that year-round action plan. We set benchmarks in each of these areas to help you feel like you're moving forward in them and developing all of them as you're working on that stewardship ministry. So let's get into a little bit more of those 4 areas real quickly here on this next slide. You'll see in the graphic those 4 pieces represented, all connected together. They're all really important. So one of the tools that we offer is a stewardship health assessment that helps you identify how these 4 key components of a stewardship ministry are being developed at your church. The goal of the assessment is for you to see where you're excelling, where you're doing really well, and then where there's opportunity for some growth or improvement. And then you can help focus your church's efforts in a meaningful way that will lead to some positive change in people's mindsets around stewardship and how they're living as stewards. So I'm going to read aloud you some questions related to each of these areas, and I invite you to think about your church as I read them aloud, and whether you would say yes or no to these questions for your church's stewardship efforts. Of course, our long-term hope is that your church would be able to say yes to all of these questions. We've never worked with a church who could come in right off the bat and do that, but our goal is to get you there to be able to say yes to all of them. So we're going to start with theology. Again, I'm just going to read a few questions for each section. I want you to think about your own church and whether you can say yes or no to these. So theology of stewardship, these are some questions to think about. Has your church spent time talking about the theology of stewardship? What does the Bible say to us about being stewards? Is a theology of stewardship ever published in your bulletin or included in any of your other communications? Does your pastor talk about stewardship? Does your Christian education program discuss stewardship for children, young adults, and adults of all ages? And is stewardship invited and celebrated through an intentional offertory practice? Do you go through the motions every Sunday? Has it changed during COVID and you haven't quite gotten it to where you feel like it's meaningful? The offerings are really key opportunity that you have to ground those gifts in theology of stewardship. So what does your offering look like? And is it intentional and meaningful for folks? The second area that you see there is ownership of mission and vision. So here's some questions to think about for your church. Does your church have a mission or a vision statement? Are you intentional about identifying the assets that you have in the church that you can use to support your mission and your vision? Do you budget to your mission and vision? Oftentimes we'll work with a church and they'll say, oh, we're all about Christian education here at this church. But then when we look at the budget, we see that very little money has been allocated for Christian education. So it's looking at how that money is being designated and seeing if it lines up with that mission, what you say you're all about as a congregation. And then finally, does your church help its members directly connect their stewardship, any gift they make of time, talent, treasure, or testimony, with helping the church achieve that mission or that vision? If you're not doing that, that's a great place to start to help people see, hey, when I give money or of my time, it's helping us as a church work towards this vision or accomplishing this mission. And narrative budget can be a really great tool to help in this area. Third piece, bottom left corner there you see, is leadership. Having leadership that's engaged and transparent about what's going on related to all aspects of stewardship. So some questions to consider here are, do church leaders, pastor, board members, stewardship committee members, if you have one, agree on any kind of statement about what stewardship is at your church? And are they able to articulate that effectively? We work sometimes through a structured process to help you create a stewardship belief statement. And I'll give you a couple examples because those can be really powerful. Here's one. At blank Moravian Church, we recognize God as creator and owner of all. We rejoice because God loves us so much and God entrusts us with his creation. We grow in our relationship with him as we discern what would God have us do with all he entrusts to us. So they worked hard to say, hey, what do we believe about stewardship here? And how do we want to express that so that anybody in the congregation when stewardship is talked about, they know what that means. Another example of a stewardship belief statement is, we believe everything we are and have belongs to God. We use our gifts to further God's mission in this world. So I'd be willing to bet if you went to that church and said, hey, what do you believe about stewardship here? They would be able to say that to you, maybe not word for word, but they have been formed in that, they've embraced that, and it anchors everything that they're doing related to stewardship. And that's a really powerful thing to be able to say as a congregation, hey, here's what we think. So I'm gonna challenge you next time you have a board meeting or a committee meeting, if you're part of that, go around the table, hey, what do we believe about stewardship here? And listen to all the different kinds of answers that you might get. That's a starting point to say, all right, let's come together as a group to have a more unified way to express what we think about stewardship. Some other ways to think about for your leadership, other questions to think about for your leadership are these. Does your pastor feel comfortable talking about stewardship? Are they supported in that conversation? Do the church boards, the finance committee, stewardship committees collaborate? And how is the church leadership transparent about matters of financial stewardship? If you answer that question, yes, but then you say how you are transparent is that you share numbers once a year, we would work with you to be a little more transparent than only communicating about budget numbers once a year. And then that final piece there on the pie is creating a culture for giving, a year-round sustainable stewardship ministry. So we're going to delve into that a little more deeply here in the next slide. You'll see 3 different ways to think about a year-round stewardship ministry. If you are sitting there thinking right now, oh my gosh, I don't even know where to start, and now you're telling me I have to come up with a plan for a whole year, please don't panic. We can work with you week by week. You can look at a month, a season even. So it's the important thing is just to start moving towards having some practices that the church can embrace from year to year, so that you're not only talking about stewardship once a year or even not at all. So there you see what is a year-round stewardship ministry all about. First and foremost, it's about that holistic view of stewardship. Sometimes our churches only want to talk about stewardship when they're having trouble paying the bills and they need more money. But we know that part of our stewardship being all that we are, all that we do is time, talent, and testimony as well. Testimony is just relationship building. It's how you're encouraging people to give of themselves in relationship and conversation with one another. And that's a really critical area. Our churches did a great job with this during COVID and being really intentional about reaching out and staying in touch. So just making sure you're continuing that testimony piece of the stewardship pie, so to speak, year after year. Second thing there that you see is ask, thank, tell, celebrate. So if you are familiar with Charles Lane, he's a wonderful pastor and writer who wrote a book called Ask, Thank, Tell. Highly recommend it. And then in a conversation with Reverend Lane several years later, he said, shoot, I want to go back and add to that book. And I would add celebrate, because it's really important for our communities of faith to celebrate the impact of our collective stewardship, right? It's not just about what I'm giving, it's about what we're giving together and how God is using that in the world. And that's worth celebrating. So that's an important thing to think about as well. Not just asking people to give or saying thank you, but making sure you're telling people, hey, here's what our gifts have accomplished, and then celebrating that and giving thanks to God for that as well. Give you a great example of something that one church did to make sure that they were thinking about stewardship in a holistic way, inviting people to give of themselves through testimony and celebrate. And they created what they called a giving wall. So they had sticky notes of all different colors, and they gave folks a prompt, which was, I give because. And they invited everybody to finish that statement, I give because. And then folks would stick those up on the wall, and you could walk up and see all these different colors and read what everybody had written, these very powerful one-sentence answers, I give because. And people were learning from one another. They were inspired by one another. And my favorite answer that really resonated for me was someone who said, I give to this church because I need to be reminded that my money is not who I am. So there's all kinds of different ways. We could spend forever on this area of how you can be intentional about time, talent, treasure, testimony, ask, thank, tell, celebrate. So again, if all those things are overwhelming, there's 4. There's some really simple ways to get started, and we'll work with you on that. Finally, as you think about a year-round stewardship ministry, it's really important to consider that there's 4 different ways that people give of their money to the church. The first one, and this comes out of Cliff Christopher's book, Not Your Parents' Offering Plate, which you might be familiar with. So when he wrote that book, he identified 3 pockets, and then he, years later, said, oh, I want to add a 4th pocket. So it's our folks are always learning and growing and adding to what they recommend. So his first area of giving that he shares in that book is annual giving. You're very familiar with that. That's tithes and offerings. That's the things that are supporting the ongoing vital day-to-day ministry of your church. Fixed costs like utilities and salaries and insurance and buildings and grounds maintenance and upkeep, that kind of stuff. The second way that people give to your ministry is capital giving. And those kinds of gifts typically support new construction or maybe expanding or renovating an existing facility. You may be one of those people that cringes when you hear capital giving or even capital campaign. That's not always everybody's favorite area of work, but we know that that kind of giving is crucial for healthy congregations. And there are also people who are really passionate about updating and upgrading facilities. So the third kind of financial stewardship is called special giving. This is above and beyond people's regular contributions to areas that they really care about. A specific example of a special gift might be that if your church needs to restore its organ, maybe you've got a designated fund from a planned gift that would support that restoration of the organ, but you know people at your church really care about music. That's a critical part of worship. Then you know that they would want a chance to give to help support that restoration of that organ. So that would be considered special giving people a chance to be generous to something that's really meaningful for them as a church. And then the final fourth pocket is called planned giving, the opportunity for people to support ministry beyond their lifetime or to make a specific type of gift through the tools of philanthropy that Vince was sharing earlier. And MMFA can help your congregation with this in an intentional effort for the whole church. And that is going to do several things. It's going to factor in the needs and hopes of your church right now, but also into the future. It's going to help you educate people on the importance and benefits of planned gifts. And it's going to give you tools and resources that you can use to help keep planned giving, gift planning in front of people year after year. So there's all kinds of ways that we can help with our stewardship services, assessments, and different areas that we can help you create action plans for all of those grounded in beautiful theology of stewardship that we believe, which means that we know it's all that we're doing all the time with everything that God has entrusted to us. The good news that I will leave you with on stewardship services is that this is a free service of the foundation. So absolutely no reason for you not to pick up the phone, give me a call, send me an email, so we can start having a conversation about how MFA can help you in this area. So back to you, Vince.
Thank you, Laura. And what a great lead in to our fourth area of services called gift planning. Within this category, I would like to tell you about a new tool that we have, which is our Legacy Planner. It is an online free legal document generator. And I will show you a little bit about how that works and what kinds of documents you can get from that. I will also talk again about the tools of philanthropy, the various kinds of funds that we can structure a gift plan for a donor that is customized and aligned with their passions. And then the last point I will make under gift planning is that we have a boot camp, a recorded training session that if you have a group of people within your church who would like to learn more about different kinds of gift planning, then we have a recorded series on that. Or if you'd like to get a group together, we can actually teach that specifically for that group. Our Legacy Planner is a new tool. This link at the bottom is something that you'll probably want to make sure people in your congregation have. It is free to anyone who is leaving assets to a Moravian church or agency. It does not require an attorney, and it produces actual documents that are ready to sign, notarize, witness, and file. And the various kinds of documents that can be produced from our Legacy Planner are, of course, the last will and testament, a financial power of attorney, advanced healthcare directive, letters of intent to the beneficiary charities that you name in your will. And it also produces instructions on how to get witnesses in front of a notary, sign and file in your specific state. So I actually created my will using this tool. I will say that I have a fairly simple estate. It's not at all complicated. For me, this is really all I needed. Some of you may have a valued or trusted attorney in your life. If you do, you may want to use this as a great way to organize your thoughts and prepare to produce documents that can be reviewed by that person. But the system actually, once it generates, you'll answer a series of questions, and based on those answers, it will generate the actual documents, and it will also produce instructions. So here's a copy of the instructions. I know this is small, but you can kind of see here are the steps. Here's what you need to do step by step, how to contact witnesses, how to gather the witnesses and a notary. In most places, that would be a requirement. And then how to file these documents in your state so they would be available and legal. So this is very helpful. For me, I have used it for my own will and found it to be very helpful. And it actually produces the documents that you are ready to use. Again, just touching on some of those tools of philanthropy. Philanthropy is a big word, but it simply means various kinds of funds, trusts, and structures that can be made to help align the donor's gift and make that gift sooner during their lifetime, or maybe provide income during their life. And there are a number of different kinds of funds that can help there. We have a section on our website that has calculators that you can envision the various characteristics of these funds. And of course, we'll talk to you one-on-one. Just call us and make an appointment. And there's no charge for us to talk to you about making a planned gift of some kind. It will help the donors see the benefits of their gifts, especially in structures like donor advised funds, where the gift is made now, it's committed now, but then that donor continues to have the right to make recommendations on how grants could be made and receive the joy that comes from that. And then leave a remainder to a church or other charity, or structure gifts that keep giving forever in a form of a perpetual fund of some kind. And then the last area within gift planning is our gift planning boot camp. And it's an online pre-recorded series that we have available that you can watch on your own, or if you want to do it as part of a group, you can watch it together. Or like I said, we can make arrangements to have a live session or a live group presentation of these gift planning boot camp, so that you can become more knowledgeable about the various options available. There are some links that you might want to make sure as a trustee that are available on your site. We have looked at all of the church websites, and I can tell you that it's pretty common to see a link to our giving portal on most websites. But when it comes to making a gift of property or stock or create, a planned gift, most websites and most church websites really don't instruct people. So back to that thing I asked you to imagine about somebody wanting to make a gift on December 29th, you can make sure that your website has those links, or that the December newsletter has, or social media has these links that can help people realize that just because there's nobody in the office doesn't mean that they're out of luck, because we're here and we will be happy to help with those kinds of gifts. Just make sure that they know what to do and who to come see. This presentation will be emailed to you tomorrow, and all of these links will be in it, and also a link to the survey and a link to the recording that we're making at this time. And now we're going to hand it back to Laura, who's going to tell you about the final or fifth area of services, grant funding for ministry.
Thanks, Vince. Our grant making program is one of our newer services, so we're excited to tell you a little bit more about it. We award grants from several different field of interest funds, and you'll see that list there. Those funds seek to address basic human needs such as food, water, shelter, clothing, as well as things like caring for the earth and for one another. Our grant program is funded in two ways: by both the generosity of individuals who are passionate about these particular areas of need, as well as a portion of our net income each year. So every year we facilitate a grant cycle with the goal of putting as much money as possible from these funds out to God's good work through your ministry. We have a grant advisory committee that's comprised of Moravians from all over the country, and they convene to review all of the applications and make recommendations for grant awards to our board of trustees. And then those trustees make the final determinations on any grant recipients. We award the grants and then provide oversight. We've got a great link on our website, which is mfa.com. If you get on there, you'll see grants as one of the tabs, and we call it Grant Central Station. But it's got all the information you could possibly want about guidelines for applying for a grant. It's got a wonderful list of various stories of past grant recipients. So if you're wondering, hey, I wonder, if this project at our church would meet this particular fund, you can see some of the different ways those funds have distributed in the past. So I think a lot of great information there that you can peruse in your free time, and then connect with us about possibilities for your church. Which leads me to the next slide, which is key dates, because our 2023 cycle is getting ready to gear up really soon. So the first step in applying for a grant from MFA is to schedule a consultation. Those are going to begin May 15th. And a consultation is just a quick Zoom or phone call with Ainsley Davis. She will listen to the project that you have in mind and make sure it lines up well with the fund that you're thinking about applying from. She'll give you a little more details, such as typical amounts of grants that are awarded from that fund, so you can kind of have a realistic sense of how much money might be available as you're thinking about your application and that kind of thing. Then after you have that consultation, she will email you the application. It's just a one-pager, and you complete that. You get it signed by the appropriate parties, and you turn that back in. You can mail it in, you can scan it and email it back in, and those are due by June 15th. And then we will give our grant advisory committee plenty of time to read through, make recommendations, and then go to our board for approval. And you'll see that you will be notified of a decision by July 27th, and we will announce those awards on July the 28th. So again, I encourage you to get on our website, mfa.com, go to that grant tab and take some time exploring the possibilities. We know that our world has a lot of needs. You as a church are working to address needs of the people in your neighborhood, in your communities, and in the world even at large. And God is calling us to respond. God is equipping us, God is gifting us, and we can use our time, talent, treasure, and testimony to help meet those needs. So we encourage you to, again, take some time to look at our grant service, think about those needs that your ministry is trying to meet and how you want to respond, and we hope you will answer and apply. So turn it back over to Chris to close us out.
Yeah, thanks, Laura. I want to thank each of you for your time this evening. Thanks for joining us. You're all leaders within your churches. Thanks for the time you give your church. Thanks for joining us to learn more about our services and hopefully walk away with a tool or two that you can take back to your church and use. We do have about 4 minutes left on the time. So if somebody has any questions that you didn't want to put in the chat. Maybe you just want to come off mute and ask us. We could take a minute and try to answer questions that way. Does anybody have any questions tonight? Jeff, thanks for the note in chat. We appreciate that. Thanks for your time. Anybody have any questions? If not, as we've shared, everything's going to be emailed out to you tomorrow. If you have follow-up questions after that, you can reach out to any of us. Our contact information is in the presentation. And I hope all of you have a great night and a blessed weekend ahead. Thanks for joining.